Yeah, so today I'm gonna be— Boo! Did I fucking scare you? Pussy! So today's gonna be the video where I'll be talking about the second half of the Red Rising series. If you guys did your homework by the time you made it over to this video, you'll have read over 1,000 pages. You'll have become a fan of my favorite series, and therefore I'll have found out what your wedding ring size is. This will also be the video where I'll be revealing the fact that I just might be the first person on planet Earth to have read a set of books in the wrong order. I made that video of my like summer book log of me being like, hey guys, I started reading Red Rising, I'm on book 4. Or no, I was like, no, I'm on book 5 and I'm planning on reading book 6. And then it wasn't until I posted that video that people in the comments were like, yo brother man, you read book 6, you're on book 6. And I was like, oh, I am on book 6, because I went from Iron Gold, finished it, posted that video of the summer log, and then I was like, hey everyone, book 5 is pretty good. And then I found out that that's not book 5. This is book 5. It's fucking like almost 1,000 pages, and I just skipped over it. It wasn't until I was like halfway through Lightbringer where I was like, damn, dude, this is a fucking brutal time skip. But it turns out that I missed like an entire book, which I guess provides me with a unique perspective, I fucking guess. I don't know. We'll figure all of these emotions out later in the video. I'm not going to reiterate all the stuff that I said last time. You already know how this is going to work. I'm going to like review the first half. In the first half of this video, it's going to be like a review of Iron Gold, Dark Age, and Lightbringer. And then I'm going to bring it over to general spoiler talk of like very specific moments. I think this video is probably going to be a lot more spoiler talk because it's just so hard to bring up stuff without ruining it for somebody out there. So general review, book review guy in the first half, and then full on spoilers of me talking about like genuinely really specific details about the series in the later half. No more stalling this time. I don't want the video to be insanely long like last time, so we're going to get straight into it. Number 1. So, in 2013, the first book of Red Rising came out. All of the sequels came out. And then for a while, Pierce Brown took like a fairly long break before coming out with Iron Gold. And if you have a pair of eyes, the first thing you might notice is that the girthity of this book and the other like sequels are just way bigger. And the other thing that like immediately happens the second that you start reading Iron Gold is that the narrative perspective has totally changed. So in the first 3 books, the story takes place from the perspective of Darrow. And in this one, you open its first chapter and you're like, hold on a fucking minute, guys? What's going on? And so the story takes place 10 years after the last point of Morningstar takes place, from Darrow's perspective, where everybody is much older and wiser and more traumatized and more shit has happened. And you can also tell that there's like a bit of a tonal shift. I think Pierce Brown took a lot of time off to be able to just like recuperate himself and decide on how he was going to finish the series. I think a lot of fans at the time just kind of assumed that Morningstar was the conclusion to that. But I believe that Pierce Brown in interviews later mentioned that like it makes sense to do that from like, I guess maybe a movie or an adaptation perspective, but this was going to be like the final thing and he wanted it to have like a closing moment. And so a lot of things I think were changed for the better or for the worse, but I'll start getting into that. So I think the first 3 books are kind of like a very, I guess, run-of-the-mill hero's journey where Darrow kind of like works his way up to be able to achieve his ideal dream of being in a position of power and being able to like overtake the entire gold hierarchy. Well, I think this second half more so goes into like, what are the actual consequences of those actions? And everyone, now that they kind of got what they ever dreamed of, the narrative is trying to almost like break down what are the logistics on how the hell they're gonna be able to like get there. You know, I think Morningstar kind of like introduces that, like tries to initiate the iron rain that they placed over like the main planet. I think this is where like a lot of people kind of like either stepped away from Red Rising for quite some time or just kind of put it down altogether, because it kind of is like, if I could describe it, it's like the first trilogy is a shonen, a very stereotypical hero's journey of a lot of shortcomings, a lot of difficulties, but they make it out on top, while like the second half is like a seinen, like truly trying to fundamentally break down what the hell are these people in power going to do to be able to take down a hierarchy system that has been taken over an entire galactic system for hundreds of years. And so this is kind of where it becomes more of like a traditional sci-fi series. For some people, you might not be like really into that. For me, I fucking loved it. I would even argue that like it's a different shape of love that I have for this second half versus the first half. The first half, I think, just like gave me a grand amount of dopamine in terms of just having so much fun and reminding myself like how enjoyable reading can be. While the second half, I think, was truly like a matter of Pierce Brown having grown up. Like a lot of time has passed by the time that the second half came out. I believe Iron Gold was released in 2019 or 2018, like a good time after the initial success came along, and also just like the way everybody else matures. And I think it's a drastic tonal shift that I like. As I was reading this first one, I don't think I was able to like adjust to right away. And a big reason for that is just because Pierce Brown decides to tell the story from four people's perspective. And I'm not like a fantasy sci-fi novel type of guy, so I just don't have that much experience with reading stories that are given from that particular direction. Most of the stuff that I read is like POV based, and so I just found it a little bit jarring at first when like I was building up certain momentum with a guy like Darrow, and then all of a sudden it would switch over to some random stranger called Ephraim or Lyria. And it took me a little bit to like get accustomed to that, but thankfully they were from perspectives of like people that you eventually over time, some taking longer than others, you do end up growing to love. And I think it was like an aspect of the story that I was able to appreciate. And I think like a lot of the times Pierce Brown's reasoning behind wanting to do that was to provide more perspective of like other colors. So for example, Lyria is a red, Ephraim is a gray, and Lysander is a gold, but like a natural born high class gold. And some of the perspectives I really enjoyed. I almost kind of found myself liking reading Ephraim and Lysander's perspective more than Darrow, just because so much of Darrow, and even he as a character admits that like his everyday life is just kind of like being a war leader, like a military general, and the spontaneity of being young and finding yourself isn't really there anymore when you're a man in your mid-30s. In some way, I think that's like almost beautiful, because there are certain moments, like especially early on, that I super appreciated where I'll bring it up now, fuck it. There's like this moment early on where we're 10 years into the future and Darrow is married to Mustang and they have a kid and they decide to name it Pax, as it was revealed at like the end of Morningstar. And there's like this little tiny paragraph where I think Darrow talks about how when he first initially met Mustang, he was kind of just like saw her as this just like super beautiful, gorgeous person that he was really attracted to. While nowadays, as a husband of this person for 10 years, and now they're being like the mother of like their child, he talks about how like that perspective has shifted a lot. To them, there's like a genuine unconditional acceptance that he has for this person. He's not just like, Mustang's not really like a person that he's attracted to necessarily as like a young kid would anymore. And I thought that was really sweet. Like I thought that was like a really great way to demonstrate the feeling that comes along with like the way people perceive each other. Darrow and Severo aren't just like two homies that happen to have met at the academy anymore. They're like lifelong brothers. And I think I as a person who really, really fell in love with the first half of the series, there was like a lot that I don't think we had time for in the first half. There weren't a lot of moments to like sit down and reflect the meaning behind everything that happened and how that kind of shaped these people the way to be. And for those reasons, I was just like I loved it. Like it's almost like so many of the moments aren't really with anything happening. It's a lot of just like heavy, dense character dialogue. But the main difference between that and like what most other sci-fi fantasy series would do is that they kind of start their story with that and then they make it like dialogue heavy. Well, like all of these people, and so the justification for their reasoning behind what they're talking about. And I find that to be like less overwhelming as you're getting through it. That being said, it is a tiny bit of a slog at moments, just because like I think you can kind of tell that Pierce Brown's not familiar with telling stories from that perspective. And especially for a character like Lyria, I think there was some struggles of me really connecting with this person. Part of that is like almost intentional, because Lyria is written to be a Red who was kind of disgraced from the benefits of what Darrow was trying to do. He, I guess, created a program for the citizens of Mars to be able to like evacuate from the mines, but they didn't really figure out all the logistics of that. And so Lyria kind of represents like the mistreatment that comes with idealistic goals and people who have like high ambitions but don't really figure out like the individual treatment that each family gets whenever you try to do a big charity or like a big notorietable act or something like that. And I think for those reasons, like it's different. It's strange. It's different, but I did kind of love it. As you can see, like I added a fuck ton more tabs this time as opposed to like the early books, because it's also like the author is growing up, and so their prose is kind of growing up too. It's just so much more common for Pierce Brown to want to like sit with a moment and those tiny little specks of like the last bits of the series where he's talking about how Darrow's uncle blinks, but he like blinks for a really long time because he can't accept reality. Or he describes Nero for that one paragraph that I mentioned where, he talks about how Nero doesn't just have the eyes of like one single person. He has generations upon generations of human psychopaths who are trying to achieve perfection. There's just so much more of that. There's so much more like potent writing within each moment that I super appreciated, but it does have major drastic flaws that in a way I could kind of understand why it just wasn't what like a lot of people expected. And a lot of those things I think are considered to be fair, but overall I would say like I super enjoyed it. It's just, yeah, it was a lot. But again, most of the other stuff I'm going to say, I'll just save it for spoilers. So we'll move on over to Dark Age. So once again, I do not have like a fucking normal functioning brain, and so I just didn't know that this was book 5. But basically, I just like read the beginning of this, and for those of you who are like big Red Rising fans, do me a favor and just like try to remember what happens at the end of Iron Gold, and then remember what happens at the beginning of Lightbringer, and tell me like that kind of doesn't like sort of makes sense. Like it made sense. Like under no circumstance did I read the beginning of Lightbringer and I was like, oh, I might be missing a little something. It's just kind of like over time, like it was like a burning sensation that just got warmer and warmer, and I'm like, something is totally off here. But I'll save it for the spoiler talk. There's like one really big thing that happens that I can't say. So yeah, I read Dark Age kind of late, and I kind of already knew everything that happens in this book because it gets talked about at the beginning of Lightbringer. And so like there weren't that many surprises as I was reading it, which might have taken some of the enjoyment that I was initially supposed to have with this. But that being said, just to fucking, say it right away, this was like my favorite book, like in the second half of the trilogy. I loved Dark Age an unbelievable amount. I loved it so much. If you can see, there were so many fucking tabs on this. There are so many sentences in this book that are just like jarringly amazing, because Dark Age is kind of like the book where a lot was built up beforehand, and then there's like the big war that happens on Mercury, and that war is written from different wars of how Pierce Brown normally used to go about it, where it was kind of like action, 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 moving forward with like specific moments. I think Pierce Brown in the battle that happens on Mercury was just kind of more brave to really, really sit with certain moments. For example, vaguely describing, no spoilers. There's like a lot more moments that are particularly focused on the civilians, the people who cannot help themselves when they're in the middle of an attack. And I think it's like what impressed me a lot was like it was written from the perspective of the enemy, because it's written from different POVs. You're never really on like the hero's side. It's truly like the prime example of this is a battle that's going on and both people think they're on the right here, and you can see how quickly and easily they have to like villainize the other. In this example, it's Darrow and I honestly, I don't even know, like, I don't even know how I'm supposed to like make it this far without it, but it like truly is where the 4-person narrative perspective really shines. If Iron Gold is like a matter of Pierce Brown trying to get through the logistics of figuring out how to write like a 4-person perspective, Dark Age is like jazz. Like Dark Age is like free flowing, moving, beautiful, like it's like a dance almost. It's so many people that I didn't expect would end up being like significant characters. There's so many characters that I didn't expect would play such a significant role. Prime example, of course, is like Lyria, but also like Victra. I think she was introduced in Golden Sun, and I kind of just like put her off aside as like a very cheesy, stereotypical, kind of like that one chick from Avatar, Zuko's cousin or niece or girlfriend or whatever her name is. I don't exactly recall. I kind of thought it was like she was gonna go like in that particular direction of like a betrayed daughter of a like lineage that she wasn't exactly like supposed to. She didn't actually like act in support of, so it was almost like her destiny that she was supposed to be the bad guy. That's what I thought Victor was gonna be, but she became so much more than that. She became like more of a pivotal role than Severo even, and I love that so much. I think Victra is like up there as one of my favorite characters now purely because of that. But yeah, there's so much to love with Dark Age. It is the most dense one out of the whole series. I think it's like 750 pages. And so like there definitely were moments when it was slow, and you know, I'm reading it at night and I'm maybe getting through like 20 pages or like 20 to 30. A lot of it was because I was like at home at the time, and so I had a lot of stuff going on at the moment, and so I just wasn't like particularly in the mood to just like rush through it. But for those reasons, it also kind of revealed to me the like I think it was this book that kind of taught me, like, I almost understand One Piece fans now. One Piece is a show that I grew up watching since like middle school and high school, and I think like by my sophomore year of high school, the Doflamingo arc had just finished, and I kind of like dropped the series after that and never really was able to understand like, why is this a thing that so many people are obsessed with? Like, out of the big three, why was it One Piece that decided to like take things so far and be able to still have like such a long lasting journey? And I think reading this deep into Red Rising has helped me understand that there is just a degree of a connection that you have with characters after you spend so many years with them that just cannot exist from a short story or like a one-off piece of like a one-off movie or like a one-off anything. Pure, like it's just those movies and short stories can be good and special, but there's something like deeply human in that you have spent so many hours just every single night consuming details about a person and like dissecting them and, you know, understanding them down to a molecular level that is just it's visceral and like beautiful. Like you truly feel like you understand a person to a degree that I don't think I was able to really understand before reading something like this. And so yeah, for that reason, I'm just like as the series goes on, it's just deaths become so much more visceral, especially because like if in early on it wasn't exactly clear as to like who is supposed to be a good guy, this one is trying to like really force you to be like from the perspective of the enemy, understanding why Darrow is the enemy to these other people and why is the enemy to them and why they both are gonna just fucking like kill the people that you love, and it sucks. It sucks so much. It's such a brutal, visceral book. I'll save the rest of my stuff because there are a lot of moments in here that like I want to talk about, but I'm gonna save it for the spoiler section. But I loved it. I seriously loved it. It was my favorite one out of all of it. It just amazes me that I was still able to enjoy it this much, knowing literally all of the spoilers. I think I'm like a 1 in a million type of person who just does not care for spoilers. I have notoriously mentioned this on my channel before, like a bajillion times, but I don't personally care about spoilers. Like if you spoil a show to me, I kind of treat it as like reasoning for me to watch something that I might have not watched before. So I don't really think too like negatively of them, but yeah, it did suck a little bit. Like I'm not fully, I understand the appeal to like wishing that like all of these things didn't come as a surprise. So there's a certain guy that ends up dying that I knew he was going to die because I saw it in like the first fucking a couple pages of Lightbringer, and I was like, oh yep, it's about to happen. Fuck, sucks to suck, man. But yeah, let's get over to Lightbringer. And so then we get over to the, so far, last book of the Red Rising series. Basically, what was supposed to happen was that Pierce Brown, I believe, was working on this book during the span of COVID / like a little bit afterwards. And this was supposed to be the original finale of the entire series. I believe it was like written to be over 1,000 pages. And once that draft had been like finished, Pierce Brown decided to just end up splitting it into 2 books. And so I think when you read this, having that context, it's a little bit obvious that kind of ends up being the case. Like I've mentioned already a billion times that there's definitely just like a general change of pace by the time that like we get to the second half. But this is a very, I think out of the 3, this is definitely like the slowest one to really pick up speed and like have it going. Out of all of them, this is like the hardest one to say literally anything of like what occurs in this book without bringing up any spoilers. But I will just say that like truly Lightbringer is like the prime example of demonstrating how fun it is to just like watch some of your favorite characters mesh together. Lightbringer is kind of the book where Pierce Brown decided to mix it up a little bit. People that like are normally in comfortable in particular environments, they kind of get paired up in trios or duos that you wouldn't necessarily expect. A prime example is Victra, Lyria, and Volga. I would honestly watch like an entire TV show of just those 3 hanging out. I loved their dynamic so much. I loved it as much as like when Ephraim was hanging out with Pax and I forgot what Severo's daughter's name is. But yeah, because it's so slow, again, as I've already mentioned before, like I don't think I have like a lot of complaints about it, but this one definitely was like the one that took me the longest to be able to fully get through. I have no complaints. There are like certain particular moments that were like a little bit, I could be like a little bit nitpicky about them. I don't know if it's a thing that I really super enjoyed. Maybe in my eyes, I kind of pictured that since this was written during the time of COVID and just like a lot of stuff was going on, maybe Pierce Brown got a little bit lost in the sauce during the mixture of trying to like make this an ending / like a not ending. And so there is like a lot of buildup, and you know, as I was reading it, I was starting to have my doubts, but what did a complete 180 on that opinion was just like the last 150 pages of this. There's a particular battle / fight that happens between a guy, but there's like a big, sorry, I don't know why I am like struggling so hard to do a balance between like spoiling and not spoiling, but yeah, there is like a big battle, 2 big battles that happen at the end, but both of them are just like such a graceful, sick fucking crescendo. There's like a good 15 to 20 pages where one of the characters just enters into a flow state, and that's just like a term that has kind of almost become like a cheesy like trope almost that we talk about in real life, you know, for sports games or video games, that somebody is just locked in and is able to like just dial in and perform perfectly. And visually, it's not really that cool anymore, in my opinion. Like whenever I see the flow state, quote unquote, be depicted in media, I just find it like a little bit of like a Deus Ex Machina. But in this book, I think it takes a really, really strange shift into that idea, and it spends like 15 to 20 pages describing like the inertia between humans and the earth in a way that I had never seen before. And I thought that was so cool. If you know, it doesn't matter, because I can't do it. I can't fucking talk about these books without doing the spoiler section. I'm sorry. If you want to wait, I'm gonna rank it at the end of the video, but this is gonna be the spoiler. This is the spoiler section. I'm sorry, I have to do it. So let's just get this right out the bat, because there are a lot of like narrative perspectives in each of the books, and I'll say this like right away for who was my favorite character. For Iron Gold, I think Ephraim was like deeply, deeply my favorite person. I love the idea of like a bank heist crew in like a future sci-fi dark world like Red Rising. That's so funny. Like I don't know what motivated Brown to come up with that like as a motive, but that is just so sick. That is such a funny. I love Ephraim's dynamic of talking to golds, and they're so like overwhelmingly powerful and these like giant, massive, perfect creatures, and he just kind of has to be like a slimy, manipulative piece of shit to be able to just even sustain himself, like even be able to like maneuver around the everyday world throughout that. And then for the Dark Age, my favorite character was definitely Lysander. Lysander's perspective, I think, is fascinating. He gets kind of introduced in the first part of the trilogy as the son or the grandson of Octavia, and there are like a lot of implications that this is a very unique and special child, is like genetically predisposed to have a lot of similar traits to Octavia, kind of more cold and callous, and the main thing is that their strengths is not their power, but almost like their intelligence to wield that power. And so Lysander is kind of like a really, really opposite perspective to Darrow. Darrow is kind of the guy who through brute force gets the things that he wants, while Lysander kind of has to like elegantly maneuver his way around the world. And so it's really, really fascinating the way the second half of the series is almost trying to like slowly guide a brain like that, a child who was raised by Cassius for a majority of his life, and kind of slowly integrate himself to becoming a villain. Like being a gold was almost a thing that he was taught to be ashamed of after the death of Octavia, and it's just so cool to see him like first accept that and then go through like the 6 stages of grief until he eventually becomes the main villain of the series. The buildup of that is so gradual. Like you spend thousands of pages waiting for that moment to happen, and then it finally happens, and you just it hurts. I understand why people make such a big deal out of like Game of Thrones moments, because I've never seen the TV show, but like I know the way people talk about like a Song of Ice and Fire, and I think I get why villains like that hurt so much, because you've sat with them for so long and you're like, please, I know you have every reason to decide to do this and it makes sense why you want to do this, but please don't do it. And then they do it, and then it hurts. It hurts a lot. The other thing I want to acknowledge is that I'm genuinely amazed at like how high of a bar that was set after the first part of the trilogy in terms of like who was going to actually end up being the main villain now, because by the time Morning Star ends, the Jackal was gone, quote unquote. Octavia and Aja die, and so the thought process is like, you start Iron Gold and you're like, what is going to happen? Like, who is going to step up for that occasion? And I am so surprised by how well Atalantia and Atlas were able to fill those shoes / probably go like 2 sizes above that. Like in a way that like I was genuinely surprised, because Atalantia is such a just like fascinating villain, because she represents such a like opposite approach to what we saw before. Octavia was kind of like cold and callous and super calculated about the way she went things, and Atalantia was just kind of like represents pure hubris and ego. Like she's fully driven in spite, and just like is the example of a person who will fuck over and step on anything to be able to just like wield a little bit of power. She's such such a extreme, like mythological version of what every single gold represents in a way that's so frightening. And what makes it even scarier is that like there are a lot of people within the circle of Atalantia that knew her when she was a child, and so they kind of talk about in certain moments of dialogue of like how, you know, tragic it is to see what Atalantia has become, because there's a past when she was like loving and caring and would study with everybody. And it's almost like in hindsight now that Atalantia is a ruler, like she dominates the entire inner core. It makes people question, like, was all of this intentional? Like, was she trying to just like develop rapport with high political figures since like day one? Like, when did she decide to act this way? Another moment like that is the intimacy that she has with Lysander, like such a supremely fucked up relationship where like she's so obviously taking advantage of this younger boy, yet like there are moments of vulnerability where like Lysander is seeking out weakness in her because he's also trying to like gain leverage over this person, and she's aware of that, and it's such a weird and strange dynamic. So when like Atalantia is being vulnerable, you can't tell if it's like, you just can't get a read on her. You can't get a fucking read on her, and it's so scary. Yeah, like, on top of Atalantia, there's also Atlas, who is just this, like, I don't even know. For so long, Atlas is almost like a fear that just lies deep within everyone. You know, Darrow spends years coming up with the most meticulous plan to be able to like overtake this entire planet. And in the back of his mind, he's like, this plan is perfect. I have everything to my advantage, everything in my sight. But I still know that Atlas like has something in his back pocket that will forever ruin me. And what's like so terrifying is that it ends up being true every single time. And so you like build up this character who is supposed to be kind of in the same sense as Atalantia, like very cold and heartless and ruthless. But then they have that scene in Dark Age that I love so much, where Lysander meets him in the cave and he like speaks to him for the first time face to face. And he the cool thing about Lysander is that he's just like ultimately observant, like he's just so analytical about all of his surroundings, and so you're kind of experiencing the everyday world like as if you're reading a book from Herman Melville or something. Like it's just all the details are being absorbed by one single person. And so there's this one moment where he's looking into the eyes of Lysander and he's just shocked. He's like surprised that behind the eyes is like a man with empathy and like doesn't look evil, like, and is clearly just kind of like looks at Lysander like any other person would. And it's just it's such a it's like, whoa. Like I was so in shock by that there's like this main antagonist that has been built up for 2 books by now, and he just kind of ends up being like a normal guy, but not really like normal guy. Like normal guy is like a bad way to describe it, but just like underwhelmingly not psychotic in a way. And I thought that was like a really great, interesting turn to take for that, because again, I really didn't think that there would be anybody who could fill the shoes of Aja and Octavia, and to see these two be put into the spotlight. Don't even get me started on Apollonius. Apollonius is the funniest villain to like ever exist. It's so fucking funny to just have these characters be taken so seriously, and Apollonius just speaks through Shakespearean prose. Like, I don't know why, but that to me is like the funniest thing ever. I was just talking really, like by the time of recording this, it's like mid to late September, and I convinced Scamboli to read this book, and it's gonna be so funny because he's gonna be watching this section like months from now. Like, it'll take him so long to even get to I don't even know if he will get to this point of the video, because like I don't know if like the second half of the sequel. But I remember he read the first book and he was like, yo, so I'm just curious, like, is anyone black in Red Rising? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's so funny how like the first book starts off as having this theme about what's essentially like hierarchy slavery, and there are no black people like throughout the whole book. And it's so funny to look at that in hindsight, because so many of the main characters, like to me, the coolest representation of like that is fucking Apollonius. Like, he's to me the coolest character ever. A guy who just strips himself naked and plays the violin, and then it's just like, welcome to my humble abode, madam. How does do? And, like, he's just a like he's such a like unhinged Shakespearean Joker almost. He's so cool. But yes, to answer the question, I hope by the time you watch this section, yes, there are black people in Red Rising. But I've spent so much time talking about how much the prose impressed me. So I wanna actually like read out some bits that I was just like super, super obsessed with. Oh my God, yeah, okay. There's the scene where like Ephraim gets betrayed and he just like basically witnesses the death of Sephi's tribe. And there's this one scene that goes like, blood leaks out of Osgard's mouth and pools on the floor like cherry syrup as he's dragged back to me. He stares at his reflection. I whisper his name. He's straight gone. Snapped at the mental waste. Snapped at the mental waste? Are you fucked, dude? Are you fucked? Saying that you're getting your neck sliced off is the mental waste? Eat a dick, bro. Eat a dick. There's the final battle that happens between Darrow and Lysander, and Darrow is like in this massive mech suit and just topples over like a bunch of civilians that are like trying to attack him because they're for the side of Golds. And it's such a hollow, empty chapter because it's basically like Darrow having to be the bad guy to be able to achieve his mission. Like he just has to be able to get to Lysander. He has to kill these like small, lower colored, not mech armored people to get by, and he like flips that switch and it like almost like embraces the like visceral gore of that. And so it just describes in great detail the suffering of these people who are fighting for something they believe in, but to Darrow's perspective and to obviously like us from the reader's perspective, it's the wrong side. But the most fucked up one is He finally gets control of himself. He's like being held by his arms. He stands up, and then the book goes, as a mob, they were a single organism. In fear, they divide. In death, they become lonely as I weave them into my twitching meat carpet. He describes him murdering a city of civilians by a twitching meat carpet. That is so bad. That is so bad. That is so bad. That's so bad. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then I like this other line too. So there's like a lot of moments that are like, I think paragraphs that are like deeply, deeply descriptive about a person's ethos. I decided to, I think, not take note of that. And there were like a lot of just very, very quick one-liners that I think like I was super obsessed with. That's the type of writing that I think came from like the second half of the book that like I was super obsessed with. Like just so much gold every other sentence that I just, it really, really broadened my eyes on like the way writing can be. The fact that like you can effectively communicate so much through just such simple sentence structure. Like Pierce Brown just has very succinct and like concise form of writing where like everything is just a couple words, period, action, period, feeling, period. Like it's not like flowery and difficult to understand. And so I thought that like it gave me like a very unique perspective on what writing can be. All this to say, I ended up like completely switching over on my perspective on Lyria. I don't think I really liked her a lot, but by the end, especially when that time that she spends with Victra and Olga, these two people that are so opposite to her, and the fact that like the three of them come from such polar sides of the world, and that like the three of them are able to just spend time together and almost like find another sister amongst themselves, was just like super beautiful. Like a lot of people that I didn't think I wouldn't like so much ended up being some of my favorite characters, and the prime example of that is gonna have to be Cassius. Cassius, by the love of God, he truly, I think, you know, obviously Red God has not come out yet, but Cassius, I think, might be my favorite character in Red Rising. Like, I was so heartbroken by his death. And so this leads me to the part where I'll explain why I started reading Lightbringer after reading Iron Gold, and I didn't like fucking like bat an eye, because at the end of Iron Gold, Cassius has his fake death, and then like Lightbringer begins like with it revealing that Cassius was alive, like on that ship. And so I'm like, oh, like clearly it was just not like a supposed to be in the beginning of the book, is to like give you a sigh of relief that never ended up happening. But no, it turns out that Cassius's death was obviously faked and revealed in the middle of Dark Age. He rescues Darrow at the end of Dark Age, and Darrow and Cassius are together at the beginning of Lightbringer, because I missed the entirety of Dark Age. But that's totally fine. We're already past it. It's fine. It's whatever. I was a number one Cassius hater when I started off the book. I understood that he kind of represented a certain destiny of a person who normally would be a protagonist in any other fantasy series except for this one. It's almost like the dichotomy between Darrow and Cassius is that, like, Darrow normally would consider this man to be a best friend of his, but it's just in this lifeline, they have to be enemies. And for that sake, when you're reading the story from Darrow's perspective, it's only natural that you get frustrated with a guy like Cassius, especially because you fucking want, you're rooting for Darrow and Mustang to get along in the first 3 books, and then Cassius is in the way, and you're like, fuck this guy, dude. Like, fuck this guy. I'm rooting for like the main couple. Whatever. I'm not gonna be cringe, but like you get what I'm saying. But it's so funny to look back at that and then see how by the end it was Cassius who ended up being the struggler. Like, we always perceived that Darrow was like the Batman and Cassius was the Superman. And you find out that it's like the other way around. Darrow got to win in every aspect. He got to meet the love of his life and have a, raise a beautiful child with them and have a life and become a leader and be respected and looked up upon. And Cassius was just like taken away from society and betrayed and had to live with Lysander, and then Lysander like let him down, and then he let down Lysander. Like, he's just a living, walking disappointment. And so his whole narrative is kind of just like him trying to find something to grasp onto in this shitty, miserable life. And like, I found that so beautiful and hilarious. Like, there's so many moments where Cassius is just basically like trying to demonstrate humor, not because he thinks he does think he's funny, but it's just purely because like there's this one line where Darrow and Diomedes and him are in a prison cell together, and Cassius is just talking about like, oh, would you look at us guys, the 3 strongest swordsmen, and we get taken down without a fight. And they're like, Cassius, shut the fuck up. And he's like, what's the point of life if I got nothing, if I can't make a light of a bit of a joke? And like, he's like trying to be humorous, but you're like, oh my God, like this poor guy like can't fucking get a dub. There's also like this other scene where he's yeah, there's like this one scene that is like super sad, and they're like about to leave on a spaceship, and Cassius is just like staring off into the distance, and Darrow's getting like pissed off, and he's like, I can't tell if this guy is like pondering or if he's posing for a coin. The phrase posing for a coin for a guy who just like is being fucking like a caricature of themselves is just like such a funny way to describe it. And then the climax of his death is so brutal. Like, I never understood why in the realms of the internet I was hearing that a lot of people hated Lysander. I was a guy who just didn't know better, and I finished reading Lightbringer and I was like, oh my God. Not only is that like the crescendo of Lysander fully embracing the fact that he has become the villain, but it is also like the person that was supposed to hold on to him dearest, and then he dies from like wanting to believe in Lysander. Like, dude, yeah, I cried, so what? Yeah, I cried, and so fucking what, dude? Yeah, what a visceral scene. I loved Lightbringer just as much as I loved Dark Age. I think there were only 2 moments that I think would put it like a couple points down if I were to turn on my no, I mean, this is not like really a critique brain. Like, I genuinely, like, emotionally, as I was reading it, I thought there was like something off about it. The first one was when Severo found out about his son in Lightbringer. It kind of gets foreshadowed that he was eventually going to find out towards the end of Dark Age, but I thought the reveal of that was like a little bit awkward and almost felt like that section where Darrow is trying to talk about it with him finally after so much tension was being built between them. I thought the execution of it was like a little bit awkward. And then there's also the other thing that kind of threw me off was the decision to make the parasite in Lyria's brain kind of be a non-factor anymore. It felt like they were building that up towards the end of Iron Gold and like all of Dark Age, that this is going to be like a significant factor in Lyria. And I think I've heard in an interview before for Pierce Brown that he was originally going to make that parasite like a new ability that would make Lyria powerful in this war, and he decided not to because it felt wrong to do that. And I think in my eyes, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, but from my perspective, I didn't think it was that jarring for that to happen to her. I thought it was a little strange that like they invested an entire book into this thing that was going to happen to her, and then all of a sudden she was like, no, I'm good, it's okay. Like I understand the message behind it, but I don't know if like I was even concerned about that at the beginning, that like all of a sudden Lyria would become like this all-powerful being. But I guess I'm interested to hear what you guys think. But yeah. If I could rank the books, I will say that for me, on the tier list of the entire series, I think Iron Gold goes a little bit below the first book in B tier, mainly just because I think it, from a narrative perspective, was like a lot of just like Pierce Brown trying something out, and some of the bits not exactly working, and that's okay. It's totally understandable. Big drastic tonal shift, no biggie, especially in comparison to like the literature that's out there. This was like an amazing book to read, but for me, B tier. Dark Age was S tier. I fucking love the battle on Mercury. I love how like visceral it is. I love how compared to every single other war, it just goes so deeply into detail about how unforgiving and how random war is. Like they spend an entire book developing this relationship between Lysander and I think it's Seraphine, but there's like this one gold from Jupiter that he kind of, it's like almost promised that they're expected to develop a either friendship or some form of like a relationship together, and she just dies like out of nowhere in the blink of an eye, like one sentence, and it's intentionally done and to be jarring like that, and to depict war like that was just something that I've never really seen before. Yeah, I would give this one an S tier, and then Lightbringer for me I would literally put it like right behind Dark Age, but I think it was just for the like a couple bits like that, and also just for the fact that it spent so much time building up that for me it goes into the A tier. I love the shit out of this book, but it just wasn't like everything that I expected, and part of it is just because this was supposed to be the ending, and a lot of clearly like changes were made throughout that like clearly were adjusted to the vision that Pierce Brown made. So that's gonna be pretty much it. It has now, I love this series so much. I could spend so many more hours talking about it. I'm sure in later streams or in later videos, I'll keep bringing up Red Rising, but I do mean it that like this series had such a drastic impact on me. I got to like the last 50 pages of Lightbringer, and obviously there's like, the scene where Cassius passes away, and it's like super depressing. Also, it's so fucking funny, the line where everybody is saying their, honest feelings to Darrow about that what Cassius meant to them, and Volga goes up to him and she's like, your friend was very hot. It's just, I thought that was so funny. But I started fucking tearing up towards the end of the book, not because of like the events that were happening, but because it was finally about to be over. Like Red Rising to me, this was a journey that I embarked upon a couple months ago, and I spent a lot of time just not really binge reading it as much as I did in the beginning, but like sitting with it for so long. And to me, it was just like this giant, massive, grand universe that was ahead of me. Like I had so much to look forward to, and being on those last 50 pages of Lightbringer, knowing that Red God is going to be coming out in this next year, just made me like so emotional that like I even got to have that. The fact that there's just like an author out there in the world who was in a garage in their early 20s and just came up with like all of these things and was able to, after so many years, build it all together. And now that he's working on a conclusion, like it's finally about to happen. It's fucking unheard of in the fantasy genre for anyone to finish their series. So like that's fucking insane, and that's something that like I'm super grateful for. But yeah, I wanted to make these videos real quick just because I wanted to talk about Red Rising and see if anybody else fucked with Red Rising. Hopefully I have convinced some of you to read it. Hopefully at least more than one. I know for a fact that I got scammed to get into it, and I would love to be that guy in the same way that when I first made my main channel and I made a video about Chainsaw Man, I still have people reach out to me all the time saying that I got them into reading Chainsaw Man. I would love to fucking, you know, obviously not to that same scale, because obviously I'm not going to make a video about Red Rising. It's so impossible to talk about books through a video essay, but I would love to just like know that down the line I like made somebody read it, because I do think it's like a great special book, and I connected with it, and you know, I don't expect that to happen to everybody, but if it did happen, that's like a great, awesome gift that I would love to just like let you know about in case you didn't. I don't want to make it seem like I'm responsible for any of the art that was being made. I'm just a guy that's like recommending it. But yeah, thank you so much, Pierce Brown. Please don't rush the ending. I get so like annoyed when I like go to look at his Instagram and all the comments are like, when's the book coming out? Just shut up. Just shut up, dude. Just stop being so like impulsive and impatient. It's gonna happen. It's fine. Just stop. Just shut up. Just stop bothering him. Just let authors write, and let them write in peace, and stop harassing them and expecting that they're just like AI machines that can like computate a thing. Just be patient and enjoy it when it happens. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Back to regular videos from here on out, both on the main channel and on the second channel, because I think this was like mainly the last thing that I was planning on posting before just fully going back to like main channel stuff. But if you guys have any other recommendations, let me know. My plan right now is I've got like 4 nonfiction books. I'll put it up on the screen right now, stuff that I'm reading, and then right after this, the next series that I'm planning on opening and trying to get through is the Sun Eater series. I've heard so many things about it. It's next on my list, but I'm giving myself like a non-fiction phase for maybe like a month or 2 before I dive deep into whatever that's going to be. So wish me luck. Anyways, take care. Bye-bye.